down. Well, Leighton, a bold project here taken on by Michael Johnson and issues forcing him to call off the Los Angeles leg. Fans are still worried about the future of the meet, although he has said that this decision is to safeguard the long-term health of this meet. How do you read what he has said here?
Well, there are a couple of factors, Lance, that you have to consider. The meet is a fledgling meet, so therefore there are always going to be teething challenges, financial and otherwise. Sponsors, of course, broadcast rights, the value of those broadcast rights, and of course, getting the fan engagement. We saw what happened in Jamaica, where gate receipts were virtually non-existent because they had to give tickets away for the last 2 days because there were concerns about the fans showing up. And of course, things improved in Miramar and of course in Philly, and then the subsequent cancellation of the LA leg of the series. Now, what this perhaps means is that, well, one of the things that was mentioned yesterday was that there was the economics of the venue didn't make sense for them to carry the league out on for the fourth leg. Now, when you look at what the reality is, that these are always going to be challenges that they had to face as a fledgling, as a startup. As you know, in startup businesses always have new challenges that perhaps were unforeseen or projected, but they turned out to be a little bit worse than what they were expecting. Overall, when you look at what was generating throughout the three legs so far, is that the engagement from a fan base inside the facilities that they were being held were not what they were expecting. They're probably expecting bigger crowds. And of course, the broadcast deals that, when you look at it as a new event, wasn't going to generate the numbers that they probably were expecting. So yes, on one hand, there were concerns that probably are being realized now. But two, I think going forward, because there's a report coming out of the UK today that suggested that had they held the LA leg, they would have ended up with a $2 million loss. And they actually ended up saving $2.5 million for prize money and transportation costs. So from a business standpoint, you don't want to sell a product to new investors, because I'm understanding that they're going to announce a new investor, I think maybe early next week. That you don't want to go to a new investor and showing them your books at a loss. So to cut the LA leg probably save them that embarrassment or that reality of coming into any new negotiation with a loss on their books. So yeah, there are many concerns around the reality of what is Grand Slam track, what iteration is going to take going in 2026, or if there is going to be a series in 2026. So that's where I think they find themselves now, where it's going to come down to very, very hard business decisions about the correct model of the meet, of the series, I should say, and of course, the financial viability of moving forward.
Yeah. So many questions, Leighton. I'm not even sure where to start, but let me start here. I recall ahead of the Philadelphia leg that an announcement came out that they would move from 3 to 2 days. Given what has happened now, at the time, Grand Slam Track said that they had listened to the stakeholders, they had listened to the fans, they had listened to everybody, and that's the reason why they were cutting the days. Do you look and think differently about that explanation and about that move, given this cancellation?
I think, Ricardo, at the outset, I've always thought that 3 days was going to be too much, especially when they started in Jamaica following the Lionel Messi visit and then champs just 6 days before that. So another 3-day meet, given the economic situation in Jamaica, the average salary base in Jamaica was always going to be a challenge. But going forward, 3 days was always going to be a challenge wherever you went, because look, attention spans are not what they used to be. Track and field, especially in the United States, where 3 of those meets are going to be, is not a big sport anymore. As you mentioned previously, track and field, I don't think, rank in the top 10 sports in the United States currently. So to have a 3-day meet was always going to be a challenge. So they cut it down to 2 days, and it seemed to have worked because a bigger crowd turned out. In Philly, we were about 25,000 people turned out for that meet. But the reality is that one of the things that they're going to have to look at is the model going, if there is to be a second iteration of Grand Slam track, is to what the model will look like. Because you have to garner attention, and not only just for the fans who are going to be coming into filling the seats, but also for the broadcasters as well, who would not have probably been paying much for those rights this year, but we're looking for growth in second year as well. So that's how I look at it.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Leighton, that you said from your standpoint, from the outset, you always felt there would be teething pains. You always felt that things wouldn't necessarily run perfectly for the first season. But can you understand that there are many fans, that there are many onlookers who might be shocked at this development, given the fact that Michael Johnson had promoted and marketed GST as the savior of track and field? So for the savior of track and field to end prematurely in the first go at it, I'm sure, Leighton, you can understand that onlookers of the sport and of the league may become even more skeptical going forward.
Understandably so too, because when you brand something as the savior of anything, you are having higher expectations than would you be a normal meet. Say, for example, a club version, or like Atlas is doing in New York. So yes, there'll be a lot of disappointment from fans. But one of the things since last night actually, I've been calling around talking to some people who are watching and who had a vested interest into seeing this meet succeed. And they liked what they saw in terms of the competition on the track, the performances, the head-to-heads that I think engage a lot of track and field fans, purists. For new fans, I'm not quite sure did enough. And that is where I think the challenge lies, in the new eyes on the sport, especially in a country, as I mentioned before, where the sport has fallen down the pecking order. So yeah, there would be a significant challenge in that regard in terms of thinking of this event as the savior of the sport and then not delivering to the 4 meets that they had expected. So there would be skepticism going forward. And of course, for those fans who were probably new fans, it probably would have helped to reinforce why they weren't watching in the first place. So that's a concern that the stakeholders would have going forward.
And I don't mean to bring this up again, but it's only because you opened the window, and I love to jump through windows from time to time, Leighton.
Absolutely.
But isn't that what Noah Lyles was asking for a product that would bring new fans to the sport? And if not, then the financial rewards, and he was getting neither, and that's part of the reason why he said no. In my opinion, he doesn't look so stupid now. How about you?
Well, look, let me couch it by first of all saying this. I do not have anything against Noah Lyles.
I never thought you did, by the way.
No. But I've gotten some feedback to suggest that I am anti-Noah Lyles. So that's why I address that. I'm not.
Well, that's unfortunate.
What I have an issue with was that I believe that if this is a new venture that wanted him and Shakari Richardson and others to be involved to help to grow the sport, I don't think it would have been a bad move for them to be a part of it, because it would have helped to bring their fans into the event and have them engaged as well. That's all I was simply saying. But yeah, he would have been proven right in that respect, that the meet didn't deliver in the way in which they expected it to deliver. But I go back to my initial point. Maybe there would have been had he been involved, because he has his fan base, and therefore, had he brought his fan base over into Grand Slam track, maybe things would have been different.
Maybe things would have been different indeed. And just looking ahead now in terms of where Grand Slam track goes from here, when you look at the release from Michael Johnson and just listen to everything he has said, in my opinion at least, he's been rather coy, non-committal in in what really happens going forward. How do you read that situation?
Exactly the same way. When I saw his statement, which we used for our story on the SportsMax.tv website, it was pretty much saying it was a lot of almost a 4 minute statement saying pretty much nothing. All he was saying is that they've proven that the model works, but if the model works, why then cancel the fourth meet? So there are questions still to be answered. Only Michael Johnson can answer those questions. What I will say is that if the meet does come back, they're going to have to do a better job of convincing people that this is a model that can actually work for people who want to be engaged with track and field and for the health of the sport, especially in the United States. And I say especially in the United States primarily because when you watch European track meets, Ricardo, you've seen them. You don't see these issues with challenges with crowds. Just yesterday, you saw a full stadium in Oslo. I'm hearing that there's also going to be a full stadium in Stockholm.
Yeah.
London usually has big crowds.
And by the way, there was a pretty full stadium in Hengelo, and that was a World Challenge meet.
Championship meet as well. So the issue here is the U.S. market. So can they find a model that actually works in the U.S. market where when you watch an NFL game, the game stops every 30 seconds, or the NBA where it stops every 15 seconds, or 24 seconds, sorry. So you're looking at a situation, on a model of appealing to an audience that's used to these frequent stoppages so that probably the fans can digest the next play. How do they get a model that works for the U.S. market? I think that's a primary concern because, unfortunately, despite the fact that they are the market that is had been honed and been weaned on NFL and NBA and all of these stop and start sports, to get their interest for a sport that used to be big in that country, but is no longer the case. That's no longer the case. So the model has to work in the U.S. for it to be considered a success. That's the biggest challenge that they face.
Yeah, and another serious challenge, Leighton, as we close off this discussion is the fact that they haven't gotten any buy-in from the European market, certainly from the standpoint of the power brokers there. Just the fact that none of the European cities have has taken on Grand Slam track tells a story, and the big meet promoters there, they are very much about the Diamond League, they are very much about the World Challenge events, and they are very much about protecting their interests in those events and protecting the stature and the format of the sport as it is. And if you can't get into Europe and you can't get the American market to buy in, then you have a serious issue.
Yeah, because not only that, but there's also a schedule. Because Europe has a full calendar of meets. How do you fit a Grand Slam track into that already stacked venue schedule? Because in addition to the World Challenge meets, of course, as you mentioned, there's the Diamond League meets, and there are some of the lesser meets that people don't often hear about, but do attract a number of world-class athletes who are looking for tune-up meets, etc. So the European schedule is pretty stacked as it is. So to fit a Grand Slam track in there, which will bring, arguably bring more money into for the athletes, how do they fit it in, and how do you get the organizers there to accommodate a meet that challenges their own meets as well? So there's a significant challenge on both fronts, as you mentioned, of course. So there's a lot of discussion that will have to go on in this off season, assuming it's not the last season, about how to fit this new model into a market that on one side is lacking in interest, and on the other side, where there's already a glut that doesn't want to be challenged for the relatively low purses that they're paying at $5,000 and $10,000 purses that Grand Slam track puts to shame. But then they do have an audience for what they already have.
Yeah. All right, Leighton, let's leave it there. No box off today, but we promise the viewers that we'll have another round, another bout, maybe in September or so. We've got to leave it there.
Perhaps.
Leighton, we'll chat again soon. Take care. Let's go to break. We'll be back.